So lately I've been getting some DMs through my Instagram and through my X account, which are, well, frankly, very small at this time because I basically started them all from scratch for this channel. But many people have been asking me, how do I come to Japan to create my own business? I'm very interested in coming to Japan and becoming an entrepreneur and all these kinds of things. So I thought today I would make a little bit more of a candid video giving you some advice as someone who's run and managed his own business in Japan for over 6 years. Hoping that this might maybe shed some light on what it is like to be an entrepreneur in this country. And as always, if you find it useful, feel free to like the video and subscribe. But anyways, on to the point. I think one of the first things that I'd like to talk about being a business owner in Japan is maybe dealing with resistance and dealing with rejection in this country. Now, I've heard many people talk about Japan from the quality of life side of things, as if it were a country that found an entirely different path to reach the modern era, the modern world, to become a first world country. And what that means is that you'll find that in many other places, particularly in the Western world, things that work in a certain way are going to work very differently here in Japan. And in the case of business, for example, in the case of becoming an entrepreneur in this country, that might manifest itself as a lot of resistance against your way of doing things. Now, like I've said before, as someone who's coming into another country, it's generally your responsibility to adapt to the way that things work in this country. But still, you'll find that when it comes to you coming into this country and creating your own business and trying to open your own doors, things might not be as easy as they could be somewhere else. Now, that's not to say that things are not changing, because Japan is definitely becoming a lot more flexible in terms of entrepreneurship, but they do have a tendency to be very attached to the way that they've done things forever. So what that means is that at some points when you want to do things in a particular way or you want to create a certain type of business, they'll tell you, that's not how we do things, we're going to do it this way, or we'd like you to do it that way. For example, in my personal experience, one side of our business focuses on physical products that we have for our customers, either for purchase or for renting as well. And on the other side, that same business also has a service that we offer those same customers. And on the side of the service, pricing has to be done in a very specific way. Why? Well, because that's how we've always done it, and because that's what the other businesses are doing. But when you think to yourself, or when you share with your partner or with your customers, well, I'd like to innovate things a little bit, I'd like to bring things into a slightly different direction, you'll be met with a lot of resistance. And depending on the stage of your business, if you're early enough where the reputation of your business has not yet been fully established, that resistance can very easily turn into rejection, because people are going to find something they're not very familiar with and they're very easily going to turn away from it and go towards a business that works in a way that they're used to. And so when you're faced with these obstacles once and again, that resistance and that rejection can very easily kill your motivation, kill your drive to create something in this country, and it can maybe even make you question if that was a good idea in the first place. But I don't think that's necessarily always going to be a bad thing. Because another thing that you should always keep in mind is that you can take advantage from the fact that you'll always be a foreigner. Now, of course, don't take it the wrong way. I'm not asking you to come to this country and behave like an idiot and act like those influencers or tourists that basically come to Japan and turn it into their own personal playground. But there are certain things that you as a foreigner, a well-behaved foreigner, can take advantage of when it comes to building or creating your path as an entrepreneur through this country. Because on the one hand, you might think that there are lots of obstacles in your way, and yes, there are, but people will always be willing to be a bit more lenient with you, because they will not always expect that you will know and understand and apply and adhere to all the rules and all the customs in the country. So they'll understand sometimes, to a certain extent, that you'll be doing things a little bit differently. And if they'll understand it, then you might as well profit from it and use that as a little bit of a drive to be able to create things in your own way. And on the other hand, in the same kind of order of ideas, there are things that back home, back in your home country, would have been absolutely normal that here in Japan are a little bit more rare, and that's what we could call your unfair advantage in this country. We always hear people talking about using your unfair advantage to stand out among the population, among all the influencers. If you want your YouTube channel to stand out, then you have to use your unfair advantage. And here in the real world, the same thing applies, particularly in a country like Japan that is so uniform and so attached to a certain way of thinking and a certain way of doing things. You can use your ideas, your personality, your own vision to stand out among all the rest. For example, here people are very interested about learning other languages, mainly English, I imagine, and as you might know, most people that live in Japan come with the idea of becoming language teachers and things like that. So you, as a foreigner, you could also implement a certain multilingual aspect into your business where you offer services both in Japanese and in English, or in multiple languages if you speak more than those two. Like, for example, in our business, we offer services in 5 different languages because, well, that's something that's a bit more normal for us back home. But here in Japan, of course, that's very rare. So that's one thing that we decided to exploit, basically, and take advantage of to make our business stand out above the rest. So for all the people that are always asking me, what kind of business can I start? What's a good business to start in Japan? I think the first thing you need to be aware of is what is your unfair advantage when you come to this country. And now, going back to what I mentioned earlier about Japan reaching the modern era through an entirely different path, you'll find that one of those things that are very, very different here in Japan compared to the rest of the world is the way that we sign documents. Because here in Japan, generally, you're never going to use a pen to sign a document. You're going to use your inkan, your personal stamp. Now, if you'd like to learn more about that in detail, I think I've already put out a video on my channel explaining all about that from the point of view of a private person and also as an entrepreneur, because you're going to need different inkan depending on what kind of person you are. So I think that video is already out explaining all you need to know about how to use your inkan properly. And if it's out, I'll leave the link right down below. And if not, then I'm sure the video is going to be coming out very, very soon. But in any case, you're going to have to get your own personal inkan. If you're a private person, you're going to need at least 2. And if you're a business owner, you're going to need at least 5. That's right, that's 5 inkan, and they each have a very different purpose. So again, you can go watch that video right after you finish this one, and I promise it's going to make it a lot easier to understand. But in any case, things can get a little bit convoluted when you have to deal with so many personal stamps and situations when you need this one or that one. And likely you'll find yourself in a situation where you have to sign a document but you don't have your stamps with you, and so probably the person is going to send you back home and you'll have to make another appointment for another day. So to avoid that, make sure that you understand exactly how these things work. But that's just one example, because there are of course many other social dynamics that work in a similar way. So it's important for you to understand how they work if you want to navigate a little bit more smoothly through the country. So if you'd like to know more about that, I would gladly make more videos on the subject, so feel free to let me know down in the comments and I'll get into more detail. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is the bureaucracy in Japan and the frustrations that you might have as a foreigner dealing with bureaucracy in Japan. Japan is quite famous for being very convoluted when it comes to its own bureaucracy. But I think the main thing that I want to talk about is a little bit more light-hearted, but it still deserves a heads up. So here it goes. When you come to Japan as a foreigner, you're going to have trouble fitting your names in any application forms, most contracts that you're going to write, and basically any document in which you're going to need to write your full legal name. Particularly if you come from a part of the world like me, where I come from, we traditionally have a first name, a middle name, and then 2 last names, one from each of your parents. And so my full legal name is actually very long, and it rarely fits in the space that they provide for you to write down your name. So before I used to get very frustrated by this, but now I've learned to anticipate for it. So if I know that I'm going somewhere like a bank or the town office or whatever, and I need to write down my full name, I go a bit earlier, because I know that always the person at the window is going to try to find a way to fit my name into the thing, and so it's always going to take longer, and they're going to have to talk to their colleagues to figure out how to do it, and it just takes a longer amount of time. Sometimes what happens is that they end up only choosing 2 out of the 4 names, but they can also choose the wrong ones. So sometimes they can choose your 2 first names or your 2 last names, and you end up with forms that have no last names or no first names. So if you're going to come to Japan, I would suggest standardizing all of this from the very beginning. Make the decision to use your entire legal name, or shorten your name. You can also do that here in Japan, turn it into a kind of a nickname that you can use for most legal things. Although sometimes you're still going to need to use your entire full name as it's stated in your passport, but that can simplify things a little bit. Now, that can sound like a minor deal for many of you, particularly if your name is John Smith or Bob Marley or something like that, but I know there are many others out there who also have very long names, and I know that I always find it funny when I hear other foreigners complaining about this, because it makes me feel like I'm not alone. Like there are many of us who are struggling with the same things and the same burdens of having long names. So, as always, I hope you found this video useful, and if you'd like to see more videos like this, make sure to subscribe, and in the meantime, make sure you watch this video right here to learn more about life in Japan. So take care, and I'll see you next time.